So we mentioned NASA and the experimental mindset, and we really want to invite in with the reader an experimental mindset around silence itself, external and internal. And remember, we're not always just talking about silence outside being maybe the place where we find the most quiet inside. It may or may not be that way. We were speaking with a professor of biobehavioral health and medicine, Dr. Joshua Smythe at Penn State, asking him about internal silence in particular, when he said, quiet is what people think quiet is. Quiet is what people think quiet is. And we would add, really, it's what we experience or feel as quiet. So we point people towards finding what is your quiet. What is your quiet? As quirky as that may be. And we say that because he told us about a gentleman in his study who finds his quiet through chainsaw carving large hunks of wood. That's his way of finding quiet. How does he unwind? By chainsaw carving. And we think this matters. We're really in this book trying to broaden the definition of silence and maybe eliminate some of the hierarchy as if maybe one way is better than another. Because really, the way we find quiet is the way we're interested in being the thing we'll actually do, the medicine we'll take. And when we do have access to quiet in our lives, it can be like a medicine. It can really help us recalibrate and equilibrate our emotional states. It might help us with our relationships, the quality of our relationships and the task and our focus. So it's worthwhile to do the work to figure out what really brings you quiet, even if it's non-traditional, a little strange, and even auditorily quiet, as we say. So we open up to the idea that it might be flow states that is your best way to silence. And that could be auditorily very active and loud, and yet you're experiencing pristine focus on the activity at hand. And micro flow things like doodling or gardening or watching bees in the yard or listening to bird song. It could be nature, it could be any number of things. But what's important is what will really bring you to that experience, the sensory experience of feeling quiet. And we would love to invite more auditory quiet as well as one of the ways, just for everyone's sake, that we find a little more quiet. So we hope that helps, that quiet is what people think quiet is. And noise is also very subjective in that same way. The acoustic consultant Arjun Shankar has this great quote. He says, "Sound is when you mow your lawn. Noise is when your neighbor mows their lawn. And music is when your neighbor mows your lawn." Same sound, same stimulus. It's all about the context, and it's very subjective. So we want to point readers and your listeners towards really finding their own way to quiet and embracing it and making more time for it.
It's really important that you're doing what brings you joy. When you mention needing to turn off the radio or anything in the car, for some of us, that's a route to quiet. For others, that might be a route to internal noise and frustration. So again, to what Lee was saying, how can we find our quiet? How can you find your quiet? So among the strategies we look at is, for example, how to find silence in motion. Are there practices of running or dancing or swimming or shooting hoops or doing yoga that quiet your mind? Are there practices of just simply doing one thing, like a practice of making coffee in the morning, where you're so focused just on making that pot of coffee that you're not in the normal state of discursive thought? And we look a lot at a Japanese aesthetic principle called ma. And ma is this ancient idea of the negative space or the empty space. So the space between notes and music, the space even between words and conversation. And ma can also mean this blank space in art, but it's this idea of empty space, these little moments being pure potentiality. So we look at this idea of ma throughout the book and how to find ma on the job, for example, how to tune into little moments in the breath, in the midst of your day, how to take a moment before you open a door to go into a meeting or before you start a new task, to simply tune into a moment of reset, which you can think of as a moment of silence, sure, but you can also think of it as a moment of pristine rest at a time when, often rest might not seem like it's available, that we can tune into these micro moments and go as deeply as we possibly can into them, savoring these moments.